Hey guys, tonight we begin with the harrowing, grimy, and honestly pretty impressive life of a Victorian rat catcher. You're about to slip into the crumbling boots of someone who spent their days crawling through soot stained floorboards and their nights wondering if that scratching noise was outside the wall or inside the mattress. You might imagine Victorian London with its foggy streets and horse drawn carriages, top hats and tea, maybe even a Dickensian sense of charm. But here's the twist. Beneath all that were the rats. Thousands, millions. A furry army chewing through wood, walls, and the very fabric of polite society. And someone had to catch them. That someone is you. Now don't worry, you're not going to make it. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up with a start. It's still dark, maybe 4 a.m., but your internal alarm is a familiar one. The soft, rhythmic chewing sound of rodent teeth on something that probably shouldn't be chewed. A floorboard, maybe, or your sleeve. Your blanket is barely a blanket. It's an old potato sack stitched together with twine, and your pillow is just another sack with marginally fewer holes. You shift slightly, and something skitters off your chest. You don't scream. You don't flinch. This is just life. Your bed is a thin mat of straw, layered over cracked wooden boards, in a tiny upstairs room of a tenement house in Whitechapel. The window is more of a hole in the wall, its single pane of glass cracked like your career prospects. A breeze slips through the gaps in the sill, bringing with it the faint, comforting scent of coal smoke, fried fish, and horse manure. You sit up, rub your eyes, and stretch until your spine makes a sound not unlike a distant mousetrap snapping shut. Somewhere behind you, the lodger in the corner coughs, a deep, phlegmy hacking that tells you one of three things. Either he's got the consumption again, he swallowed a mouse in his sleep, or he's still alive. You don't investigate. You've got your own problems, namely today's rats. Now, most people would find waking up surrounded by vermin a compelling reason to move. But for you, it's Tuesday. And Tuesday means Mrs. Crumbly's cellar is due for a sweep. She's promised payment this time in real coin, not the usual slice of pie with something chewy inside. Your standards have lowered. Your stomach somehow still protests. You pull on your work clothes, which is to say, the clothes you already slept in. They are a palette of browns, grays, and unnameable stains. Your trousers, woolen and 2 sizes too big, are held up by a fraying rope. Your shirt, once white, now looks like it's been used to mop up every sauce known to man. Over it, you shrug into a patched leather vest, thick enough to deflect a small bite, thin enough to still smell like vinegar and fear. And then you reach for your boots. Ah, yes, your boots. One has a sole like a prison window, full of holes but still technically present. The other contains what you sincerely hope is a sock. You slide them on anyway, with the resignation of someone who's long since accepted trench foot as a lifestyle. There is one companion who shares your enthusiasm for today's adventure. Reginald. Reginald is a ferret, or perhaps a weasel. You've never been entirely sure. What matters is that he's long, wriggly, mildly aggressive, and disturbingly intelligent. You keep him in a cage by the hearth, a cage he escapes from regularly just to remind you who's boss. As you open the latch, he hops into your hand, yawns with tiny needle teeth, and farts audibly. Bonding, 19th century style. You strap his leash to your belt, sling your rat sack over your shoulder, and grab your tools. A trio of wire traps, a club, technically a broken chair leg, and a small pouch of poison powder. So illegal, even you don't know what's in it. It's a blend of arsenic, chalk, and hope. There's no breakfast. Not really. You nibble on a corner of dried bread left from yesterday, softened by leaving it on the windowsill overnight. Moisture, courtesy of the fog. The flavor is somewhere between wood and forgotten. You chew thoughtfully, wondering if it's normal to be this used to eating in silence while staring down a rat that may or may not be watching you back from the baseboard. Because the thing is, you're not at the top of the food chain here. In the grimy underbelly of Victorian London, rats reign. They've seen the plagues come and go, watched kings be crowned and paupers buried, all while gnawing the same crusty corners of humanity. They thrive where humans struggle. They are small, silent, numerous, and, if you believe old Ned the candlemaker, conspiring. Historians still argue whether rat catchers were seen as essential public servants or tolerated oddballs who smelt like cabbage and regret. The truth, like most things in Victorian England, lies somewhere between folklore and the sewer. You step out onto the street. The cobblestones are slick with last night's rain, the air thick with chimney smoke and potato soup steam. Children dart through alleyways barefoot, women shout greetings and insults from windows above, and somewhere a man is already arguing with a lamppost. You are, in short, perfectly at home. And as the first rat of the day darts across your path, bold as a constable on payday, you smile grimly and whisper, "Let's dance." You follow the rat, not in a poetic, mystical sense. Literally, you follow the actual rat down the alley, past a leaking drainpipe, and through a gap in the crumbling brickwork behind what used to be a bakery and now smells like stale yeast and last week's regrets. This is not uncommon. You don't have appointments, not really. What you have is instinct, a nose for trouble, and a half-remembered promise from Mrs. Crumbly about a situation in her cellar involving more rats than chairs. You're not entirely sure what that means, but it sounds lucrative. The rat scurries into the shadows, vanishing under a sagging doorframe. You make a note. That's the third new entry point this week. The buildings in this part of London are falling apart faster than you can track. And if rats were paying rent, they'd own half the city by now. You walk on, stepping over a puddle that may or may not be soup, nodding at old Tim, who sits on a crate selling bootlaces and conspiracy theories. He waves a tobacco-stained hand and calls out, "Careful, near the stables today. Rats have got the blacksmith's cat cornered." You give a small salute. That cat never liked you anyway. The morning fog hasn't lifted. It clings to the cobbles like damp laundry, turning the city into a watercolor painting someone left out in the rain. You arrive at Mrs. Crumbly's lodging house, a once proud structure, now best described as structurally curious. She greets you at the door with her usual flair. Hair like an explosion of wire brushes, apron dusted in flour or possibly ash, and a scowl deep enough to store secrets. "They're in the cellar," she mutters, barely making eye contact. "They got into the flour barrels." Again, you nod solemnly, as though this is your first rat flour crisis, and not, in fact, your fourth this month. The stairs creak underfoot as you descend. The air grows colder, damper, and denser with every step, until it feels like you're walking through someone else's breath. The scent of mildew wraps itself around your senses, followed by the sharper sting of something very much alive. You light your lantern. The flame sputters, flickers, then catches, revealing a stone-walled chamber full of barrels, crates, and the unmistakable shine of rat eyes in the dark. Showtime. You unsling the sack, open the ferret cage, and release Reginald into the fray. He hisses with glee, a wriggling missile of vengeance and mustulid fury. Within seconds, you hear the tiny squeals of alarmed rodents and the distinctive shuffle of rats making very poor life decisions. While Reginald does his thing, you crouch beside a barrel and inspect the damage. Teeth, marks along the wooden rims, shredded burlap sacks, a small nest made from newspaper, string, and a disturbingly familiar scrap of your own trouser fabric. You sigh. Historians still debate whether rat catchers were genuinely effective or just gave Londoners a psychological placebo, like spraying perfume on a barn fire. But today, at least, you're making a dent. You set your traps, simple metal-jawed snap contraptions that you bait with bacon grease, a rare treat you had to steal from your own breakfast 3 days ago. 1, 2, 3, strategically placed along the walls, under shelves, beside the barrels. You pause, listen, scratching, then a snap, a squeak, a thud, one down. A scuffle in the corner draws your attention. Reginald emerges triumphantly, a small rat clenched in his jaws like a trophy. You praise him with a sardonic nod. He drops the rat beside your sack, then promptly climbs onto a crate and begins cleaning himself like royalty. You collect the carcass. Into the bag it goes. One more coin in the invisible tally that might, if you're lucky, turn into actual shillings later. It's worth noting. Some rat catchers simply killed the rats. Others, like yourself, operated on a strange economic loop. You catch the rats, then sell them. To rat baiting dens mostly. Taverns with basements turned into mini arenas, where dogs and rats are pitted in gruesome sport for the betting crowd. You're not proud of it, but you also enjoy eating. And coin is coin. You finish up, resetting the traps and collecting another 2 or 3 stragglers, lured out by the scent of the ferret. One falls right into your boot. You yelp, not because you're scared, though you are, but because you just had that boot mended. As you climb back into daylight, Mrs. Crumbly is already waiting, one hand on her hip, the other holding a dripping mop like a weapon. How many? 5, you reply, and one particularly rude one that bit Reginald on the tail. She squints. I'll give you 2pence and a meat pie. You hesitate. The pie smells edible. Deal. You collect your earnings, tucking the coins into your sock. You don't trust pockets, not with pickpockets, and surprise rats both being frequent hazards, and take the pie in a folded cloth. The crust is firm, the filling mysterious. You chew thoughtfully, wondering how much of it used to be your client's flour. The sun is rising higher, casting golden beams across the soot-stained buildings. It's not beautiful, but it's bright, and that counts for something. You shoulder your sack again. It squelches slightly. Onward. You walk with the gait of someone who knows what's in their sack and doesn't want to think about it too hard. Each squish with every step is a gentle reminder that your job is not metaphorically unpleasant. It's literally unpleasant. The burlap is starting to leak. Not dramatically, just enough to stain your already questionable trousers a slightly darker shade of ugh. Next stop, Petticoat Lane. It's not just a market, it's a battlefield of haggling, elbowing, and occasional cabbage based projectiles. The smells compete for dominance: fried eels, pipe smoke, wet dogs, shoe polish, something suspiciously like fermented onions, and the warm, yeasty breath of 1,000 loaves no one can afford. You're not here for shopping, you're here to offload. You duck behind a fruit stall. None of the fruit appears to be legal or fresh, and head into the alley where Billy Bardsley does his business. Billy is what you'd call an entrepreneur in the loosest, least tax paying sense. He buys live rats for baiting, dead rats for tanning, don't ask, and once, for a brief week, attempted to sell them as sewer fed sausages. That enterprise ended exactly how you'd expect: hospital visits and a citywide distrust of mystery meat. Oi! Billy grins as you approach, revealing a full set of teeth, all of which belong to different decades. You look like death warmed over. You raise the sack. 13. He whistles low. Busy morning. You nod and deposit the bag beside his weighing scales, which may or may not be calibrated using witchcraft and hope. Reginald peeks out from your coat pocket and hisses. Billy hisses back. The two share a long, aggressive stare before mutually deciding they have better things to do. Billy unties the sack and begins inspecting the goods. He prods a particularly large specimen with a twig. Fat one this. Must have been dining on chapel scraps. You shrug. Or Crumbly's pies. He chuckles and counts out your payment. 4 shillings and a halfpenny, plus a bit of sausage he swears is pig. You're not asking. Somewhere in the background, a group of boys jeer as a mangy terrier chases a rat through the gutter. It dives into a drain, escaping with only half a tail. The terrier, undeterred, dives after it. You'd admire the tenacity if it weren't so familiar. You turn to leave when a man in a tall hat and shiny boots approaches, eyeing your sack with professional disdain. Rat catcher, are you? He asks, in the same tone one might reserve for stepping in something unfortunate. Only on days that end in Y, you say, tipping your cap. He doesn't laugh. There's been an incident. Down near Limehouse. Public house infested. Landlords threatening to burn the place down. You pause. Does it come with payment, or just third-degree burns? He glares. 3 shillings. More if you find the nest. You nod, pretending not to look interested. But you are. Limehouse means docks, and docks mean bigger rats, fatter pay, and possibly a free drink if the landlord is in a mood. You set off again, weaving through the crowd. A child nearly barrels into you, chasing a hoop with the kind of reckless joy you haven't felt since you found an actual silver coin in a dead rat's mouth. A rare day. As you near the river, the smells change. There's the brine of the Thames, the oily tang of fish, the iron of dock chains, and the undeniable, nose-wrinkling scent of rat paradise. You find the public house easily. It's the one with 2 men standing outside holding broomsticks like weapons, and one woman trying to climb a chair on the cobbled street. The landlord spots you and waves you over like a long-lost savior. They're in the pantry, mate, and the walls, and, bless me soul, probably in the ale. You're given access through the back, where barrels of pickled vegetables and salted fish sit beside crates of turnips with suspicious chew marks. Reginald is already trembling with excitement. You light your lantern again, crouch, and listen. There it is, the telltale skittering, the high-pitched chitter of 100 tiny claws on wood, and something else, a rustling. You squint into the shadows and see it, the largest rat you've ever encountered. It's sitting on a half wheel of cheese, smugly. You swear it winks at you. You whisper to Reginald, "That's our man." You and the ferret spring into action. Traps go down. You lunge. There's a scuffle, a toppled crate, an avalanche of beats. The cheese wheel rolls dramatically across the room. The rat makes a break for it, straight into one of your snares. Snap. Victory. You hold up the cage, panting, one eye watering from a beat to the face. The landlord peeks in. "You all right in there?" "Caught your king," you reply triumphantly. He hands you 5 shillings on the spot, and a pint of something dark and only mildly suspicious. Historians still argue whether rat catchers were celebrated as brave souls or merely tolerated because they were a necessary evil. You're beginning to suspect it was a bit of both. You sit by the hearth with your drink, Reginald curled up on your lap, the caged rat glaring at you from the shadows. You glare back. "Tomorrow," you whisper. You tell your friends. You leave the tavern with coin in your sock, beet juice on your shirt, and a renewed sense of purpose. Or maybe just gas from the landlord's ale. Either way, your morning's been productive. By rat catching standards, that is, which are low, below sea level, really. Reginald is asleep in your coat pocket, snoring gently and twitching like he's reliving the chase. You pat his head softly, careful not to wake him. He gets cranky when interrupted mid-nap, like most ferrets, and all landlords. Your next stop isn't an address, per se. It's more of a rumor. A vague word on the street that the old hat factory's gone live again, which in rat catcher code means it's infested, and also probably structurally unsafe. But that's a tomorrow problem. The hat factory sits between a defunct candle works and a shop that claims to sell exotic feathers, but mostly offers pigeons with performance anxiety. The building itself is a hulking brick carcass, its windows like empty eye sockets, its roof sagging as though the weight of so many bad fashion decisions has finally broken it. You step inside. The scent hits you first. Damp felt, mildew, and something distinctly fungal, like someone tried to store cheese in a rain barrel. The light barely filters through the broken panes, slicing the air into dusty columns that make the rat droppings sparkle like evil confetti. You tread lightly across the warped floorboards, your ears tuned to the tiniest scratch, your nose twitching involuntarily. Historians still argue whether rat catchers developed a sixth sense or just a deeply unhealthy obsession with floor noises. You'd say it's both. You spot them. 3 of them at first, then 7, then 12. They freeze, you freeze. It's a standoff. Reginald, sensing drama, pops his head out and hisses. The rats scatter like gossip in a church pew. You leap forward, traps in hand, laying them with the swiftness of someone who's definitely not getting younger. Each snap echoes like punctuation marks in a particularly grim novel. Then comes the real challenge, the vat. It's massive, a leftover relic from when the factory actually made hats and not disappointment. It's big enough to hold a dozen men or 100 rats. Probably both, if you're feeling creative. And it's moving, not on its own, mind you, but from within. The lid trembles ever so slightly. A claw appears over the rim, then another. You don't wait for introductions. You climb up a rusted stepladder that groans louder than a Victorian ghost and peer inside. Rats. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all huddled on damp scraps of felt, old twine, and what appears to be a stolen doll's head. They look up at you with the glazed nonchalance of creatures that know you can't possibly catch them all. You whistle, softly. Reginald, like a greased lightning bolt of vengeance, dives in. Pandemonium erupts. You start scooping, slamming down the lid, and hauling out squealing clusters one by one. It's not graceful, it's not dignified, but it's effective. Within minutes, your sack is fuller than your social calendar, which is to say, moderately. You take a break, sitting on an overturned crate that oozes suspiciously. Your face is streaked with grime, one eyebrow is singed from what? You're not even sure, and your boots have now achieved a level of dampness known only in maritime disasters. You eat the sausage Billy gave you. It is chewy, possibly sentient. You choose not to investigate further. And then, because this job cannot simply end on a high note, you hear the scream. It echoes from the street outside, sharp and high and laced with panic. You bolt upright, Reginald still dangling from your coat hem, mid pounce. You rush outside to find a scene unfolding in the alley behind the building. A woman is standing on a crate, broom in hand, pointing at something beneath her skirts. A rat, sir, it climbed my leg. You look down. It's a mouse. You consider explaining the difference, but choose life instead. You scoop it up gently, show it to her, and in your calmest, most professional tone say, "This one's harmless, madam. Probably just lost." She throws the broom at your head. Misses. Barely. You bow and walk away with as much dignity as a man carrying a mouse in his hand can muster. The truth is, rat catchers are not adored. Feared, maybe. Pitied, often. Paid, occasionally. But you are the unseen savior of the city. The reason bakers sleep at night and apothecaries don't find rodents bathing in their tinctures. You're halfway back to the main road when a carriage nearly flattens you. The driver curses. You curse back. Reginald sneezes. You trudge onward, into the swirling soot of the London afternoon, sack of squeaking chaos slung over one shoulder. Pipe dream of early retirement, fading with every step. But the job isn't over. It never is. By now, the sun is playing its favorite Victorian trick, pretending to shine while mostly just lighting up the smoke. It hangs like a weary eye over the rooftops, barely cutting through the fog and chimney haze. You squint up at it, wondering what it's like to have vitamin D in your bones again. Then something shifts in the air. It's a smell. Now, in your line of work, you've smelled it all. Decomposing rats, live rats, wet rats, pickled rats, and, once memorably, curry spilled on a rat. But this is worse. It's like rotting eggs, old cheese, and betrayal. You know what that means. It's time for the sewers. You didn't schedule it. No one ever does. But when the city begins to hum with that particular stench, it means something's happening below. And if it's happening below, you're involved, whether you want to be or not. You head toward the nearest access point, a rusted grate behind a fishmonger's stand that reeks of ambition and low tide. You lift it with both hands and a few grunts, the metal screeching like it's protesting your life choices. Reginald whimpers softly. You nod. I know, mate. I know. Down you go. The ladder is slick, every rung an invitation to tetanus. You grip tightly, boots slipping slightly with each descent until you land in the murky gloom of London's underbelly. The soundscape changes instantly. Drips, echoes, distant skitters. It's like walking into a cathedral built entirely out of moist cardboard. The sewer is a tunnel of brick and slime, just tall enough to walk hunched and just wide enough to regret it. You light your lantern and glance down at the thin trickle of water winding its way along the central channel. Water might be generous. It's fluid, sort of. You try not to step in it more than absolutely necessary. Historians still argue whether Victorian sewers were engineering marvels or just polite lies dressed in brick. One thing's certain, they were prime rat territory. You move cautiously, listening. It starts with one sound, a faint rustle, then another, then dozens. A soft squelching crescendo. They're here. You reach the junction where several smaller tunnels meet, and you freeze. They're everywhere. A living carpet of rats swarms the walls and floor, weaving in and out of crevices, their eyes glinting like cursed marbles. You count at least 30, maybe more. One particularly daring fellow is chewing something in plain sight. You pray it's not another rat. Reginald leaps from your shoulder like a furry torpedo. The chase is on. You move quickly, setting traps and blocking escape routes with planks you carry in your satchel. The plan is basic: corner, confuse, contain. It rarely works perfectly, but when it does, it's glorious. Today is not glorious. The rats scatter in 6 directions at once. Some double back, one climbs your leg. You yelp, not because you're scared, but because it made eye contact. You swat it off, plant your boot over the nearest trap, and snap, a catch. Reginald reappears with 2 tails in his mouth and a gleam in his eye that says, "Did you see that? Did you see that? I'm amazing." You breathe heavily, sweat pooling at the back of your neck. You've bagged 7 so far. You keep moving. Then, in the corner of the tunnel, you see it. A nest. It's tucked behind a half-broken pipe, made from twigs, newspaper, fabric scraps, and, alarmingly, a doll's leg. The rats have been busy. This is a breeding ground, a rat nursery. You hesitate. There's always a moment, in your line of work, when you remember that these aren't monsters, just animals, trying to live, making do with what humanity throws away. Then one of them bites your boot again. Sentiment passes. You dismantle the nest, catching 3 more as they flee. Reginald supervises, munching on something you do not identify. By the time you climb out of the sewer, you're soaked, foul-smelling, bruised, and victorious. 9 rats total, no injuries, unless you count emotional damage. 1 nest neutralized. Back on the street, people don't make eye contact. They cross to the other side. A child points and says, "Mummy, that man smells like a dragon's bum." You smile faintly. You've been called worse. You make your way to the tannery. They pay by weight. The tanner is a wide man with no eyebrows and too many aprons. He grunts approvingly at your haul, weighs the sack, and hands you a grimy coin purse. You don't count it. You just nod and walk away. The rest of the day is quieter. You pass a pair of chimney sweeps arguing about soot density, a street preacher shouting that rats are a punishment for moral decay, a drunk man singing to a turnip. All normal. You check your socks. Still damp? You sigh. The life of a rat catcher isn't glamorous. It isn't clean. It isn't even particularly respected, but it's needed. And on days like this, when your sack is full, your ferret is smug, and your own stench clears a 10-foot radius, you feel accomplished. Also very much in need of a bath. You arrive back at your lodging just before dusk. The sky painted with a smog-stained orange that makes everything look slightly apocalyptic, which, in Victorian London, is fairly standard ambiance. You creak up the crooked stairwell to your room, every step echoing like the prelude to a haunted puppet show. The walls are damp. The wallpaper peels with such confidence you suspect it's trying to leave on its own. You open the door. A rat scurries under your bed. You nod to it like a coworker at shift change. Tag, you're it. Reginald leaps from your shoulder and bolts after it, tail twitching like a metronome set to vengeance. You don't intervene. They need the exercise. Your room is, well, it's yours. There's a window with a crack shaped like South America, a wash basin that frowns at you when you approach, and your straw bedding, which has developed a slight slope from your tossing and existential turning. You take off your coat, hang it on a rusty nail, and begin the nightly ritual of counting your earnings. Let's see. A few shillings from Mrs. Crumbly, a handful from Billy, a bonus from the tavern, and some sewer coinage from the tanner. It all adds up to enough for bread, some questionable meat, and, if the stars align, a candle that doesn't smell like regret. You place the coins in a tin hidden beneath the floorboard, right next to the emergency biscuit and the even more emergency biscuit that's really just chalk with ideas. And then, because you're either very brave or very stupid, you head back out. You still have one more job. Mrs. Hayworth, widow, lives near the Tanner's Lane, has 3 cats, none of which catch rats, and all of which stare at you like they know something about your past. She sent word this morning. Urgent rat emergency. Bring the ferret. You make your way through the narrowing lanes, past laundry lines strung like prayer flags, and windows filled with eyes and steam. Children chase dogs. Dogs chase geese. Geese chase everybody. It's London in motion. Mrs. Hayworth greets you at the door in a shawl made entirely of mystery yarn and disappointment. They're in the walls, she whispers. You nod solemnly. Of course they are. You follow her into the parlor. It's a proper one. Lace doilies, ticking clock, faint scent of lavender, and exactly one corner that smells like despair and wet plaster. She points to the wall. I hear them every night, scratching, chewing, talking. Talking? She leans in. I don't speak rat, but they're plotting. Historians still argue whether Victorian superstitions about rats having their own secret societies were widespread or just a product of too much gin and not enough daylight. Either way, you've heard stranger. You kneel beside the wall, ear pressed to the faded wallpaper. Sure enough, there it is. The scritch, scritch, scritch of busy little claws. Maybe it is plotting. Maybe it's just hungry. Reginald waits, tail flicking. You find a weak patch in the plaster, wedge a chisel into the seam, and pry. The panel gives way. A puff of dust. Then silence. Then, boom, a rat explosion. 3 at once leap out, one bouncing off your forehead, with all the grace of a sock full of beans. You flail. Reginald pounces, and Mrs. Hayworth screams into a teacup. 2 rats vanish under the settee. One runs straight for the front door and hits it face first. You and Reginald tag team the room. It's not elegant. You use the broom. He uses teeth. There is a moment when you think a cat might help, but no. It yawns pointedly and leaves the room. Eventually, order is restored. You sit on the floor panting, a rat tail draped over your shoulder like a feather boa of shame. Mrs. Hayworth hands you a saucer of tea. You drink it. It's floral, possibly broth. You don't ask. She presses a coin into your hand. You're very brave. You want to correct her. Tell her bravery implies choice. This is more inevitability, but you just nod, tip your cap, and step out into the evening air, now thick with the scent of chimneys and overcooked cabbage. You lean against a lamppost and let out a long breath. A man walks past, nods. Rough day? You glance at your rat-bitten sleeve, your singed eyebrow, the ferret curled asleep in your pocket. You could say that. He offers a pipe. You decline. You prefer your lungs only mildly offended. As the gas lights flicker on, you begin the walk back to your room. Footsteps soft on cobbles that have seen centuries of feet, hooves, wheels, and worse. You wonder briefly what you'd be doing if you weren't a rat catcher. Then you laugh because honestly, you can't imagine being anything else, and neither can the rats. By the time you reach your lodging again, the city is dim and humming, blanketed in that special brand of London twilight, the kind that feels like soot with a sunset behind it. Candles flicker in windows, dogs bark at shadows. Somewhere, someone is playing a sad fiddle badly and with confidence. You trudge up the stairs for the second time today, only now you do it with a limp in your left knee and a new rip in your trousers. You make a mental note to fix it tomorrow, which is what you said yesterday, and the day before, and so on, until the hole starts applying for legal residence. As you shut the door behind you, Reginald hops onto the windowsill and flops dramatically, as if he's just completed the labors of Hercules. You toss him a crumb of sausage. He stares at it like it's beneath him. He's not wrong. You sit down on your straw pile. It crunches. Then you roll up your pant leg. There it is, a fresh bite, small, angry, red, and throbbing. The kind of thing that whispers, "Hey, just so you know, I might be fatal." You poke it gently. It oozes. Lovely. You clean it the usual way. A splash of gin, a strip of cloth, and a wince so sharp it could cut glass. You've done this enough times to qualify as an honorary barber surgeon, probably better than some actual barber surgeons. Now, here's the thing. Historians still argue whether rat catchers built up an immunity to disease from sheer exposure, or if they simply dropped dead young and no one tracked the data. Either way, you're not taking chances. You dig under the floorboard and retrieve your medicine pouch, which consists of a pinch of dried mint, a lump of camphor that smells like grandmother's and regret, one questionable lozenge from a street peddler named Morbid Fred, and a small vial of something labeled tonic, probably not poison. You swallow the lozenge, dab the tonic on the wound, and chew the mint for good measure. You feel exactly 3% better and 97% delusional, but at least you smell minty. You lean back against the wall, eyes half lidded, and then comes the scratching, not from outside, inside, inside the wall, behind your bed. You sigh with the deep exhale of a man whose job follows him home. Literally, you knock once on the wall, hoping for peace. Instead, you get a burst of frantic scrabbling. Maybe it's a rat. Maybe it's 12. Maybe it's just a single overachiever doing laps. You reach for your broom handle, shove it under the mattress to make noise, and whisper a threat that involves boiling oil and ferret diplomacy. Silence. For now. You lie back down and close your eyes, and that's when the fever starts. Just a little one. Nothing dramatic. You're Victorian. Half your bloodstream is tea and germs anyway, but the bite's burning slightly. Your forehead beads with sweat. You get a weird urge to write poetry about sadness and bread. You pull the sack blanket tighter. If you make it through the night, you'll probably be fine. Probably. Victorian medicine isn't known for subtlety. Most advice boils down to bleed it, pray about it, or apply leeches and hope they have career aspirations. But you trust in two things: your immune system and Reginald, mostly Reginald. The little guy curls up next to your boot, still reeking faintly of sewer victory. You smile at him, grateful and slightly delirious. Outside your window, the city sighs. A bell tolls in the distance. Maybe midnight. Maybe someone just hit a church rat with a shoe. You drift off and dream of cheese. Not in a symbolic way, just actual cheese. You're chasing a wheel of Stilton down a hill, and it's screaming in French. You wake up 20 minutes later to your own snores and the faint, unmistakable feeling that your foot is being licked. You sit up, heart racing. It's Reginald. He looks guilty. You make a note to sleep with your boots on, just in case. Morning arrives like a drunk uncle, loud, unwelcome, and smelling faintly of boiled cabbage. Sunlight, or what passes for it in Victorian London, squeezes through the cracked window and lands directly on your face. Nature's way of saying, congratulations, you survived the night. Somehow, you sit up slowly, cautiously, half expecting a chorus of aches to greet you, and it does not disappoint. Your back cracks, your knees groan, and your ankle has developed a personality of its own. You check the rat bite. Still there. Angrier. Possibly thinking about unionizing with your other wounds. You stand, wobble, and then remember the best part of waking up. Breakfast. You rummage through your sack of not quite edibles and come up with a few dried peas, a hard end of bread, and what might be half an onion or a very determined clove of garlic. You decide to eat the bread and save the onion in case you need to repel someone or spiritually cleanse a haunted basement. You chew the crust slowly, imagining it's bacon. It is not. It is the texture of roofing tile and the flavor of disappointment. Reginald yawns wide and stretches across your boot, blissfully unaware that you're considering selling him for eggs. He blinks up at you. You forgive him instantly. You pull on your boots, still damp, still morally questionable, grab your gear, and step outside. The city is already awake. The fog lingers low, hugging the ground like a petulant child. Horse hooves clatter in the distance, mingled with the shouts of vendors and the far-off jingle of a hurdy-gurdy, playing something both cheerful and deeply unsettling. You head toward the east side, where the ash heaps are. Now, these aren't poetic ruins or artistic piles of soot. They're literal ash heaps, where chimney sweepings, coal cinders, dead leaves, broken crockery, and the occasional boot all go to die, and where rats go to live. There's an unofficial rule in your trade. If something's rotting, crumbling, or actively steaming for unknown reasons, rats will find it, and so will you. You reach the mound and clamber up carefully, each step releasing tiny puffs of dust and the unmistakable crunch of something you sincerely hope was just eggshell. At the top, you sit down beside a rusted wheelbarrow. It's your makeshift throne for the moment. From here, you can see the rooftops of the tenements, the spires of 3 churches, one of which leans suspiciously to the left, and at least 2 different plumes of smoke that you really hope are cooking fires, and not something more exciting. You pull out your snack, a turnip you found yesterday in Mrs. Crumbly's trash pile, and bite into it like it owes you money. The turnip, as usual, is bland, woody, and mildly resentful. While you eat, you keep your eye on the base of the heap. Sure enough, there's movement. A twitch of fur, a tiny nose, then another, and another. Rats. Big ones. Healthy ones. The kind that steal pastries off windowsills and run away laughing. You slide down the ash heap like a sluggish avalanche and land in a crouch. Reginald perks up immediately. It's game time. You set a few traps, baited with bacon, grease you pocketed from the tavern floor 2 nights ago. Then you release Reginald into the thicket of garbage and ruin. He dives in like an eel into laundry. It doesn't take long. Snap, squeak, shuffle. You collect the rats quickly. 5, maybe 6, all in varying stages of surprise. One stares at you, balefully, from the bottom of the sack, like it's drafting a formal complaint to the mayor. And just as you think you're done, you hear it. A voice, faint, distant, and annoyed. Oi, you down there. You turn and look up. It's the chimney sweep twins, Ned and Nibs, identical in grime, mood, and moral ambiguity. We got a situation, Ned calls out. Rat in a chimney. You blink. So, chase it down? Nibs shakes his head. No, up. It's stuck. Won't come down. Keeps screaming. You pause. Rats don't scream. They exchange a look. This one does. Well then, you follow them to the townhouse. A narrow, lopsided structure with windows like sleepy eyes and chimneys like accusing fingers. Inside, it smells like soot, meat pie, and despair. A winning combination. You climb the stairs, led by the twins, until you reach the top room. They point to the fireplace. In there, you peer inside. Nothing. Then a shriek. It echoes like a haunted kettle. You jump back. Reginald hisses. Ned shrugs. Told you. You decide to investigate. With extreme caution, you crawl in, lantern in hand, face first into the sooty tunnel of regret. It's cramped, filthy, and at one point, you're fairly certain you pass a petrified pigeon. Then, just when you're about to question every life choice, you see it. Not a rat, a child, covered in soot, clutching a stuffed rabbit, eyes wide with terror. You blink. What in the name of Dickens? He blinks back. I was hiding from school. You sigh deeply. You back out, grab the boy by the ankles, and gently, awkwardly, haul him out. The twins look stunned. Not a rat? No, you grunt, brushing soot from your eyelids. Just a boy with strong opinions about education. They nod sagely. You leave the house, slightly richer in experience, slightly poorer in sanity. Just another day. You walk away from the chimney, rescue feeling a mix of emotions, confusion, exhaustion, and the creeping suspicion that half of your face is still in that fireplace. You swipe at your cheek and smear the soot further, achieving a look somewhere between coal miner and disappointed clown. Reginald, perched on your shoulder, is coated in black dust, but looks immensely pleased. He didn't find any rats, but he did bite a slipper, which in his mind counts as a moral victory. You head south toward the market, sack noticeably heavier now, with the morning's ash heap bounty. Your boots squelch slightly. You no longer remember what dry feels like. You pass a fishmonger, a costermonger, a woman selling eels from a barrel, and a man trying to convince people that pickled onions cure heartbreak. You pause. They do not. At the edge of the market, you spot him. Your competition, Thomas Stumpy Merriweather. Once a sailor, now a rat catcher, missing 2 fingers and exactly none of his ego. He leans against a lamppost like he invented, leaning, tossing a dead rat up and down like it owes him rent. You consider turning back. Too late. He spots you. What? Well, if it ain't London's second best rat man, he says, grinning like a possum in a waistcoat. You raise an eyebrow. Didn't realize the top spot was awarded to someone who fell off a barge chasing a pigeon. He laughs. That pigeon was enormous, and you know it. Rivalry aside, you and Stumpy have an unspoken truce. You don't sabotage each other's traps, and he hasn't tried to sell Reginald in weeks. That counts as friendship in your book. You headed to the betting tavern? He asks, motioning toward a squat building with cracked windows and the distinct sound of shouting. You nod. Got a few lively ones this morning. Ash heap batch. Ah, he whistles. Prime rodents those, greasy from birth. You both enter the tavern. It's dim, loud, and smells like pipe smoke, spilled ale, and the ghosts of rats past. In the back, a small arena is set up. Wooden walls, a sandy floor, and rows of rough benches, occupied by men with large mustaches and small ethics. This is where the rat baiting happens. You're not proud of it, but it's part of the economy. Rats caught alive are sold for sport. Spectators bet on how many a terrier can kill in under a minute. It's grim, it's loud, and it's your rent money. You meet the tavern owner, Mr. Penfold, a man shaped like a barrel who always seems to be wearing at least 3 layers of corduroy. He examines your sack with the eye of a man who's seen more rodents than relatives. 6 decent ones, you say, 2 twitchy, 1 mildly philosophical. He grunts and counts out your coin. Stumpy sidles up beside you. Did you hear about old Jackie Big Toes? You nod. Everyone in your trade knows Jackie, famous for catching a rat the size of a house cat and naming it Ambassador. Slightly less famous for losing 3 teeth when it bit back. What about him? Gone. You blink. Gone where? Gone mad. You pause. Define mad. Stumpy shrugs. Started talking to the rats. Said they're forming a council. Been feeding them cheese and reading them poetry. You consider this. Sounds like retirement. Stumpy laughs. Or promotion. Historians still argue whether rat catchers were eccentric by nature or simply became that way through prolonged exposure to scratching, noises, and disappointment. You feel the debate could be settled with a long look in any rat catcher's mirror. You watch a match start. Terrier versus 7 rats. It's loud, bloody, and over in 42 seconds. The crowd roars. You step away. You've seen enough. You only needed the coin, not the carnage. You exit the tavern and squint at the fading light. The day's winding down, but your work isn't done. Never is. You head to Mrs. Timms's boarding house. She's one of your regulars. Owns a 3-story stack of rooms full of dusty drapes, squeaky beds, and visitors who always leave slightly more haunted than they arrived. She greets you at the door, apron stained with ink for reasons you choose not to explore. And they're in the attic again, she says, handing you a candle stub and a stale biscuit. Don't step on the floorboards near the north window. Last man fell through and landed in a soup. You nod, pocket the biscuit, and climb the stairs. The building groans like it's been holding in a secret for too long. The attic is dark, hot, and alive. You crouch low, candle flickering, eyes scanning for movement. You hear it before you see it. The soft, rhythmic chewing of wood. You edge closer. There they are, not many, just 4, but bold. One sitting on a rafter like a gargoyle with whiskers. Another's chewing the remains of a corset. You do not ask why that's here. Reginald leaps into action. You lay your traps. Within minutes, it's done. You descend the stairs, drop the rats in your sack, and nod to Mrs. Timms. Tea, she offers. You accept. Because after a day of rats, soot, slippery chimneys, and rival catchers with better boots, a cup of weak, lukewarm tea in a mismatched cup somehow feels like victory. You sit by her stove, cradling the mug. Reginald snoozes on your lap. For a moment, just one, the world is quiet, and then a thump. From the pantry, Mrs. Timms sighs. You sigh. Reginald lifts his head. Back to work. The pantry is narrow, damp, and stuffed with more pickled things than should legally exist. You suspect at least 3 of them are vegetables, and the rest might be attempts at taxidermy gone horribly sideways. Somewhere in the back, beneath the jars labeled beef essence and mystery mash, the thump comes again. You kneel, candle in hand, and shine it into the gloom. Nothing. Then, movement. A blur of gray darts behind a sack of flour, knocking over a jar that hits the floor and shatters with a sound that makes both you and Reginald twitch like someone's just insulted your hygiene. Found him, you mutter. Mrs. Timms peers in from behind you. Is it a big one? You shrug. Hard to say. Fast one. I hate the fast ones, she says, shuddering and backing away like the flour sack might explode. You nudge it aside carefully. The rat is perched behind it, breathing heavily, nose twitching, eyes fixed on you like it knows this is its final act and it intends to go out dramatically. You don't blame it. You move slowly, deliberately, holding a small net in one hand and a block of cheese in the other. You hum a tune, a lullaby, almost. Something you've learned calms you, if not the rats. Reginald paces in anticipation, and then it happens. The rat leaps, not away, at you. You fall back, startled, hitting your head on a jar of gooseberries. The rat soars over your shoulder, skids across the tiles, and disappears into the dining room with a flair usually reserved for stage magicians and disgruntled badgers. You sit up, dazed, slightly sticky, and entirely unimpressed. Mrs. Timms gasps. It's heading for the pudding. Now it's personal. You dash out of the pantry, slipping slightly on a patch of treacle someone spilled in 1843 and no one's had the courage to clean since. Reginald bounds ahead, barking like a fox terrier trapped in a noodle. The dining room is chaos. A table is set for 12, though it's unclear when anyone last ate here. Candles flicker, china rattles. And there, center stage, atop a plate of slightly green spotted dick, sits your rat. You freeze. It freezes. The room holds its breath. You throw the net. It bounces off a tureen and hits a candlestick, which topples and ignites a nearby napkin. Mrs. Timms screams, douses it with a jug of what turns out to be gravy, and the rat uses the distraction to vanish once more. You glare at Reginald. Any time now, Braveheart. He yips and charges after it with the intensity of a caffeinated squirrel. You chase them both into the parlor. There's a crash, a yelp, a knock to your shin from a footstool that's definitely holding a grudge, and finally, sweet, glorious silence. Reginald emerges triumphant, the rat dangling limply from his jaws. You drop to your knees, panting. And that is why we don't skip leg day. Mrs. Timms appears beside you, holding a tea towel like a flag of surrender. You're a marvel, she says. No, you mutter, just stubborn. She pays you in coin and leftover toast. You thank her. Reginald licks the gravy off his whiskers, and you limp back into the night. The air outside is cool and bracing. The fog has lifted slightly, revealing the smudged stars above. You breathe in deeply, filtering the scent of roasted rats, burned napkin, and something that might have been gooseberry shampoo from your nostrils. You wander east, following your usual route, past the cooper's yard, past the lamplighter, whistling an off-key tune about sausages, past the woman on the corner, selling second-hand corsets and third-hand advice. You reach a small, crooked pub called the Splintered Stool. The sign creaks overhead. You duck inside. It's warm. Not clean, but warm. The barkeep nods at you. Back again? You nod. Back always. He slides you a half pint and a questionable meat pie. You nod politely, bite once, and vow to only eat the crust. You find a corner table. It's wonky. The bench creaks, but the fire crackles and no one looks at you funny, which makes it a sanctuary. You sip your drink slowly, savoring the rare moment of stillness. Across the room, someone's talking about politics. Another's discussing ghosts in the workhouse. A third man is trying to convince the bartender that rats can sense lies. You raise your eyebrows. He might be right. Historians still argue whether rats were feared purely for the disease they carried, or also because they were mirrors, reminders of how humans scurry, hoard, survive. You've met rats smarter than landlords, and at least one ferret smarter than you. You glance down at Reginald, who's snoring in your lap like a tiny war hero. You don't need a legacy, just a bit of quiet, a sack with fewer holes, and a few less rat bites per week. Ambition Victorian style. You finish your pint, pat Reginald's head, and head back into the cool dark. Your job for the day? Technically done. But the rats don't sleep. Not for long. The moon is trying its best to shine. But in London, even the heavens have to fight through a layer of soot and unresolved industrial guilt. You walk beneath it, one hand on your sack of squirming prize winners, the other on Reginald, who's now thoroughly awake and eyeing a cat across the street with the kind of ferret swagger that suggests he's forgotten he's 10 inches tall. You take the long way home, mostly because your boots are forming a quiet protest with your ankles, and also because there's been chatter, a job no one wants. The word cholera has been floating about. You heard it first from Billy Two Noses, a nickname earned ironically due to the fact he's missing a nose and wears two replacements alternately depending on the weather. Then from Nellie the fish hag, who claimed she saw rats carrying ghosts in their eyes. You assumed that was poetic license or an undiagnosed head injury, but now, as you pass a shuttered bakery with black crepe on the door, it feels a little too quiet. And there it is, a man standing in the street, wrapped in a tattered waistcoat, waving you down. You the rat man? You nod slowly, because admitting your profession in public is always a coin toss. Sometimes it gets you paid, sometimes you get pelted with old muffins. He points to a house across the street. Cholera house. Family's gone. Rats moved in. Need you to do something. You want to say no. Everything in your spleen, spine, and rapidly aging kneecaps wants to say no. But the sack's not full yet. You approach the house cautiously. The windows are boarded, but not well. There's a faint buzzing sound, and the front steps are smeared with something you decline to name. You tap the door. It swings open. Of course it does. The smell hits instantly. Decay, vinegar, and that sour metallic tang of panic. You gag even though you've trained yourself not to. Reginald refuses to enter. He just turns around in your pocket and pretends to be asleep. Fair. Inside, the house is still. Too still. You move room to room, lantern held high, traps ready. The furnishings are covered in dust and a fine film of grief. There's a tea set on the table. One cup is spilled, its contents fossilized into a brown crust. A hat still hangs on the hook. It's like the family evaporated mid-sentence. You whisper softly to yourself, just to fill the silence. Then you hear it, a rustle, not skittering, not scurrying, dragging. You freeze. Then, movement. A rat lumbers into view, dragging what appears to be a child's ribbon in its teeth. It stops, looks at you, blinks. You blink back. It keeps moving. You lay a trap. It ignores it. Another appears, then two more. They're calm, almost organized. You get the distinct impression they've claimed the deed to this property. You kneel slowly and scatter bait around the hearth. You set two traps, one net, and one small box rigged with a spring. You sit down across from them, watching. One of them yawns. Historians still argue whether rats in cholera houses were driven there by the smell of death or something stranger. Some claimed they were messengers, ferrying souls out tiny holes in the floorboards. You don't believe in souls, but you believe in rats. You catch 3. The rest disappear as silently as they arrived. You wrap the sack tight. as if the cloth can keep out the house's sadness. Reginald finally peeks out, gives one sniff, and burrows again, deeper than you thought possible. You exit the house, shut the door behind you, and pull your coat tighter. The man is gone. You don't blame him. You keep walking faster now. You head toward the river, where the air is at least honest, where the fog tastes like smoke instead of sorrow. You stop at the edge of the dock and stare at the black water. A barge creaks in the distance. Somewhere, a gull screams like it just stepped on a nail. You squat beside the riverbank and open your sack. Not all of it, just the ones from the house. You whisper a few words, nothing fancy, just something that sounds like permission. Then you let them go. They don't hesitate. They vanish into the night, like secrets. Reginald pokes his head out again. You scratch his chin. Don't worry, you say. That was the sad part. He blinks. You head back into the city. Lights flicker in windows. Laughter spills from the tavern. A boy runs past you barefoot, chasing a hoop, like it's the key to joy itself. And for a moment, the cholera house feels like something from a storybook, the kind you don't tell before bed. You shuffle home through the narrow alleyways, feet heavy, heart heavier, with Reginald asleep again, this time draped across your shoulder like an oddly scented scarf. You pass the pie shop, with its window fogged by steam and secrets, the cobbler who always sings hymns about boot polish, and finally, the green-gilled fishwife who offers you a wink and something pickled. You decline, politely but firmly. And that's when it happens. A rustle, a flicker of movement, and then silence. You freeze. Reginald twitches in his sleep. You take a slow step forward, eyes narrowing, senses on high alert. Something feels off. Not rat off. Worse. You glance to your left. No sign. Then, behind you, a soft pattering. You whirl. Nothing. But Reginald is fully awake now. Ears pricked, nose twitching, his eyes dart side to side, his whole body tense. You whisper, "Where?" He bolts. Straight down the alley, and suddenly you're running after him, your sack of traps thudding against your side, boots slapping puddles, arms windmilling slightly because, well, you haven't eaten in 6 hours, and your knees are basically philosophical concepts at this point. You chase him through winding back streets and under laundry lines still dripping from the morning mist until you reach an abandoned courtyard, hemmed in by broken buildings and the ghosts of intentions never fulfilled. And there, caught in the dim gaslight, is Reginald, snarling at another ferret, not just any ferret, your ferret. Or rather, your former ferret. Timothy, you'd lost him 3 months ago during a disastrous job near the tannery, where a pile of cheese collapsed and chaos ensued. You thought he'd perished. But no, here he stands, alive, slightly fatter, wearing, of all things, a small red ribbon around his neck. You blink. Timothy? He chirps in recognition, then bolts. Reginald gives chase without hesitation. Of course he does. Rivalry, betrayal, unresolved rodent-chasing trauma, all bundled into one adrenaline-laced pursuit. You follow groaning, muttering a prayer to your kneecaps, and whichever saint handles ferret diplomacy. Historians still debate whether Saint Cuthbert or Saint Gertrude should hold that post. The chase leads you to a bakery's rear door, slightly ajar. You slip inside, immediately enveloped in the smell of flour, yeast, and ambition. The kitchen is dark, except for the glow of embers in a wood stove. Somewhere beyond the sacks of grain, the ferrets are dueling with the intensity of small, furry gladiators. You reach them just in time to see Timothy dart up a shelf and disappear through a hole in the wall the size of a biscuit tin. Reginald snorts indignantly, and sits down hard on a pile of flour, immediately turning ghost white. You both sit there a while, breathing, processing, covered in flour. Well, you mutter, that was emotionally complicated. Eventually, you leave the bakery through the side door and into the night. The chase has taken its toll. Your lungs feel like overcooked turnips, and your shirt is now a solid blend of sweat and pastry dust. But there's something else, a realization. Timothy's not just alive, he's thriving. A ribbon, a network of bakery hideouts, a cheeky attitude. He's gone rogue. You feel oddly proud and betrayed, mostly both. As you trudge back toward your room, you stop by the lamplighter making his rounds. He tips his hat. You seen a white rat tonight? He asks. You shake your head. Just ferrets with delusions of grandeur. He chuckles, shrugs, and moves on, his ladder clinking behind him. When you reach your tenement, the building sighs as you enter. You climb the stairs one step at a time, each one testing your will to live. At the top, you pause. There's something stuck under your door. A note, scrawled in smudgy ink. Urgent. Basement. Number 14 Broom Lane. Bring the ferret. Alive. No signature. No coin. Just a job. You sigh, because of course. You tuck the note into your shirt and finally step inside your room. Reginald hops from your shoulder to the floor, spins once, then flops with the weight of a dramatic heroine in an opera. You pull off your boots, toss them vaguely in the direction of the corner, where a mouse waves a tiny white flag and retreats, and collapse onto your bedding. Your hands are scratched, your ribs ache. Your ferret nearly had a midlife crisis. But still, you smile, because this is your life. And weirdly, you wouldn't trade it. Morning again, the kind that seeps into your bones like a wet sock with an attitude. You wake to the sound of coughing from the flat below and a pigeon giving a sermon outside your window. Reginald is already awake, grooming his tail with a self-importance you both admire and resent. You roll over and find the note still tucked in your shirt. Urgent. Basement. Number 14 Broom Lane. Bring the ferret. Alive. It hasn't disappeared overnight, which unfortunately means it's not a fever dream, but a real job. You sit up, stretch, and every joint in your body fires off a different complaint. You're reasonably certain your back said something in Latin. Reginald hops up beside you, head cocked, ready, or at least curious. You head out without breakfast. You're saving the last crust of bread for an emergency, or a sculpture project. It's hard enough to be both. Broom Lane lives up to its name. It's narrow, crooked, and smells faintly of mildew, chimney smoke, and lies. Number 14 is wedged between a fishmonger's and a curtain shop. You knock. No answer. You knock again. Still nothing. You try the handle. It opens, because of course it does. Inside, it's dark and musty. The kind of must that sticks to your clothes and follows you home like a clingy ex. The place is clearly abandoned, or at least trying very hard to be. The wallpaper peels in dramatic waves. The floorboards creak like they're whispering secrets. And from the back of the hall, a door stands open to the basement. Of course, you light your stub of candle and head down, Reginald riding your shoulder like a soot-stained parrot of justice. The steps groan. The air grows colder, damp. You feel cobwebs brush your face like ghostly whiskers. At the bottom, it opens into a space that can only be described as too much. Stone walls, old crates, broken furniture, and a smell that suggests at least 3 types of mold and one poor life choice. You crouch low and listen. Silence. Then a rustle. You turn. It's not a rat. It's a man. Sitting in the corner, staring at you, you freeze. He doesn't move. You whisper, "Hello?" He blinks, slowly. You move a little closer. He's pale, thin, draped in rags, and smells like cabbage and regret. You're the rat man, he croaks. You nod. And you're, he waves vaguely, caretaker. Of sorts. Caretaker of what? He smiles. They'll show you. Then he points to a hole in the far wall, bigger than usual, reinforced with old wood. You kneel and peer in. A tunnel, large, too large for rats, but definitely used by them. You shine the candle deeper. And then you see it, a rat. But not just a rat, a giant. Easily the size of a small dog, with patches of fur missing, eyes like wet marbles, and a tail that could be used to skip rope. It stares at you. You stare back. Reginald hisses. You whisper, absolutely not. The caretaker giggles. They call him the Duke, he says. Historians still argue whether stories of monstrous super rats in Victorian London were based on real sightings, or simply fevered hallucinations caused by mold, gin, and the general horror of being alive at the time. But right now, you don't particularly care about academic consensus, because the Duke is moving toward you. You backpedal, fast. Reginald leaps down and makes a noise you've only heard once before, the day he saw his own reflection and challenged it to a duel. The Duke doesn't charge, he slinks. Confident, slow, calculated. You drop your bag, pull out a trap, and realize it's far too small. You grab a net. It's laughable. Then you do the only thing you can. You bait. You pull out a slice of sausage you were saving for lunch and toss it. The Duke sniffs, twitches, and lunges right into the crate. You slam the lid shut. Victory. Temporary. Because the crate groans. The wood cracks. You scream. The caretaker claps. Marvelous. You haul the crate toward the stairs with the kind of strength that only comes from desperation and lower back trauma. Reginald helps by growling at it occasionally. You leave the house, sweating, gasping, and possibly hallucinating. People on the street stop to stare. A boy points. Is that a pig? No, says his mother. It's London. You haul the Duke to the nearby rat showman. Yes, they exist, and receive a bag of coins heavier than any you've ever held. Enough to eat for a week. Maybe even two. Enough to buy Reginald a fresh collar or an apology bouquet. You walk away slightly richer and haunted because you're pretty sure the Duke will escape. They always do. You reach the edge of the city where the houses thin and the air tastes more like weather and less like shoes. You sit on a rock, Reginald curled beside you, and count your earnings. Then, without thinking, you whisper, "Thank you, Duke." A pause. Then, from somewhere in the distance, a squeak. Low, loud, and far too knowing. You don't sleep that night, partially because your mind keeps replaying the image of the Duke's eyes, round, intelligent, full of vengeance, and partially because your neighbor, old Grimsby, has taken up snoring as a competitive sport. You lie on your straw mattress, staring at the ceiling, counting the cracks, then the spider legs, then the number of regrets it takes to form a rat catcher. By the time dawn creeps through the soot-stained window, you're already dressed. Reginald is asleep in your hood, his tiny snores vibrating against the back of your neck like a disgruntled kazoo. You step out into the weak morning light. The fog is thicker than usual, clinging to your coat like a needy ghost. You're halfway to your usual haunt, the bakery alley behind St. Mumbles the Confused, when you hear the bells. Church bells, not the normal chime of Sunday morning. This is more like a warning, a groaning, lumbering toll that makes even the pigeons pause mid-peck. You round the corner and see it, a child, sitting on the steps of the apothecary, pale, coughing. You stop in your tracks. You know that cough. You know that stillness around the child, How people cross the street, pretend not to notice, whisper behind gloves. You know it all too well. You approach slowly. Are you all right? He looks up, eyes glassy. The rats came first, he says. You blink. What? He nods. They came in the night, scratching. Mama tried to chase them off. Then she got sick. You kneel? Where's your mother now? He shrugs. With the others. You don't ask where that is. A priest appears from the apothecary door. He's stern, wrapped in black, and looks at you the way people look at a puddle they accidentally stepped in. You brought this, he mutters. You stand slowly. I beg your pardon? The rats, the sickness. You feed them, trade them, profit from them. You raise a brow. I catch them. You want to pretend they don't exist, fine. But they do. In every cellar, every pantry, under your very altar. He bristles. Still, you bring them closer. Sir, you say, voice low, if I brought rats everywhere I went, I'd be employed more often. Historians still debate whether rat catchers were seen as public servants or as walking omens. Some were paid by the city. Others were chased out of town with sticks and ironic chants. You've experienced both. The priest steps back. Best you leave this area. You've done enough. You consider a retort. Something clever. Something with bite. But you're tired, so instead, you nod and walk. As you go, you pass two women gossiping beneath a clothesline. I heard he raises them, one whispers. Teaches them tricks, the other adds. And knits them little hats. You quicken your pace. By noon, the rumors have escalated. A butcher glares at you. You in league with him? A lamplighter mutters something about curses. A child points and asks, is that the Rat King? You duck into a side alley and lean against the wall, breathing hard. Reginald peers out of your hood with narrowed eyes, clearly offended by the accusations. You reach into your pocket and pull out the crumpled coin pouch from yesterday's duke-catching ordeal. It jingles. Solid. Comforting. You could leave. Right now. Take a carriage. Head to the countryside. Open a shop that sells quiet things like spoons or sleep. Let someone else chase rodents and curses. But then, a woman bursts into the alley. You, she pants. They said you talk to rats. You sigh. Not with them. About them. Occasionally at them. She grabs your sleeve. Please. My bakery. They've taken the oven. You blink. The rats? She nods. All of them. In a pile. Just sitting there. Staring at me. That is new. You follow her to the bakery. Sure enough, inside the warm, flowery interior is a circle of rats, sitting, not moving, just watching the oven. You step closer. Reginald tightens his grip on your shoulder like a nervous accountant. The rats part slightly. You see it. In the middle of the oven, a lump of cheese. Not ordinary cheese. Imported. Expensive. Blue-veined and fragrant. The rats don't touch it. They're guarding it. You turn to the baker. Have you angered anyone recently? She shrugs. Only my sister. But that was about a bun recipe. You whisper to Reginald, this is getting out of hand. You clap twice. Loudly. The rats scatter. All but one. A large one. One ear missing. Scar over one eye. You recognize him. Not the Duke. But someone. You squint. Timothy? The rat stares. Then disappears into the shadows. You stand there stunned. Reginald lets out a long, slow sigh. And in that moment, you realize something. You're not chasing the rats anymore. They're leading you. And you? You're just trying to keep up. You step out of the bakery with the strange feeling that the rats are 2 steps ahead of you and possibly holding a committee meeting about it. The air is thick with flour and foreboding. Reginald clings to your coat, visibly shaken. You pat his head gently and whisper, Don't worry, mate. If there's a rodent uprising, we'll apply for neutrality. You turn the corner, hoping for normalcy. Instead, you walk directly into a town crier, not metaphorically. You actually collide with his bell, which swings forward and clonks you squarely on the shin. Bloody! You begin before catching yourself. PG-13. Always. Watch it, the crier shouts, then squints. Wait, you're him. I sincerely doubt that, you reply. No, no, the rat fellow. Everyone's talking about you. You sigh. What now? He waves a wrinkled sheet of paper in your face. There's a posting. Official. Says you're wanted by the Guild of Sanitary Overseers. You blink. That's a thing? Apparently, he nods. And they're meeting today. Why would they want me? He raises an eyebrow. Well, let's see. In the last week, you've been seen hauling oversized rodents, luring rats with sausages, causing minor fires, and allegedly speaking to a creature known only as the Duke. You rub your temples. All right, but in context, those all sound reasonable. He shrugs. I just ring the bell, mate. Still rubbing your temples, you make your way to the guild hall. It's a squat stone building that leans slightly west, as if it's given up on posture and propriety. A brass plaque reads, Guild of Sanitary Overseers, Est, 1801, keeping London barely habitable. Inside, the hall is dim and overly polished. You're ushered into a large chamber filled with men who look like they've never smiled without permission. They wear waistcoats that scream bureaucracy and have expressions best described as legally gray. A chair creaks as the head overseer rises. He clears his throat with the solemnity of a man about to outlaw joy. You are the rat man? He intones. You nod. Technically, yes. Though I also respond to, Oi, you there? And why does it smell like vinegar? Murmurs ripple through the room. The overseer continues, You are hereby summoned to explain your activities. We have concerns. Concerns? Another man stands. There are rumors that you've domesticated vermin. A third adds that you've taught them tricks and songs. A fourth from the corner mutters, They say you let one write a letter. You stare blankly. Gentlemen, with respect, I can barely write a letter. The head overseer narrows his eyes. Do you deny that rats have become unusually organized in your vicinity? You open your mouth to reply, then pause. You think about the synchronized bakery rats, the cheese circle, the Duke, Timothy, the oven incident. I wouldn't say organized, you offer. Maybe just motivated. They gasp. One faints. Reginald chirps dramatically for emphasis. The head overseer leans forward. Do you know what happens when vermin become motivated, sir? You shake your head. Do they unionize? He slams a book on the table. Plague, panic, pie shortages. You blink. One of those is worse than the others. The room erupts in chaos. Men shouting, papers flying. One man chokes on a boiled sweet and is rescued by a clerk wielding tongs. You stand perfectly still, surrounded by madness, and think, this is your life now. You're the protagonist in a weird fable written by someone who's never owned a rat, but has strong opinions about them. Eventually things settle. The overseer straightens his lapels. We've decided. You raise an eyebrow. Already? You are hereby tasked, he declares, with discovering the source of this rat cohesion. Me? Yes. You're already involved, up to your knees in it by the looks of you. That's just wet cobblestones. Nevertheless, he hands you a rolled parchment. A map of unusual sightings. We expect updates. You unroll it and see a dozen red X's scattered across the city. Warehouses, cellars, one suspiciously near your favorite pie stand. You sigh. Any compensation? He blinks. You're still alive. That should suffice. Reginald hisses. The overseer pales. Also, 3 shillings. You take the map, the coin, and your leave. Back on the street, you unfold the parchment and scan the marks. Patterns start to form. The X's aren't random. They spiral inward, toward something. A center, a heart. You look up. There's one place it could be. The old printing house. Abandoned. Crumbling. Full of inky memories and rats who whisper through the floorboards. Of course it would come to this. You pocket the map, scratch Reginald's chin, and mutter, "Well, old friend, looks like we're going to the center of the maze." The old printing house is exactly where you remember it, slumped at the end of Paper Mill Lane like a drunk with secrets. Its bricks mottled, windows long shattered, and roof line twisted as though it once sighed and never exhaled. Most people steer clear. Too many stories, too many shadows, and something about the way it smells. Ink, dust, and the faintest scent of betrayal. You stand at the threshold, staring up. Reginald sniffs the air and makes a face like he's just remembered something he repressed. You step inside. The door groans open like it's auditioning for a horror novel. Inside, everything is still. The light filters in through warped glass, revealing floating motes of dust and broken type trays. You see scattered pages underfoot, proofs of long forgotten speeches, advertisements for tonic that allegedly cured melancholy, and a half-finished poem that rhymes virtue with shoe. The air is thick, too thick. You whisper, "We shouldn't be here." Reginald chirps as if to say, "We're always here." You tread softly across the creaking floorboards, ears tuned for the sound of scratching, or chanting, or worse, paper shuffling with purpose. Then you hear it, a rhythmic tapping, not rats, not footsteps. Type. Someone or something is using the printing press. You move toward the back, past overturned tables and shelves collapsed in dramatic surrender. The press room opens up like a theater, and there, in the center, under a shaft of smoky light, is a rat, standing on the keys of the main press, tapping, letter by letter. You crouch, heart hammering. The rat doesn't flee. It pauses, then continues typing. You edge closer, careful not to make a sound. You glance at the paper in the press. A single word appears mid-line. Soon, you swallow. Historians still argue whether animals trained to type were simply mimicking patterns or operating with genuine intent. In this moment, you strongly consider joining the intent camp. The rat jumps down and disappears into a hole between floorboards. You examine the press. It's operational, oiled, clean. Someone's maintaining it. You see more pages on the floor, each with phrases scrawled or printed in erratic fonts. The cheese is not enough. We remember the smoke. Timothy lives. You blink. That last one's a bit on the nose. Suddenly, behind you, movement. You spin. Nothing. Just the rustle of old paper. You bend down to collect the pages, but they vanish, dragged beneath the floor like a bad punchline. Reginald growls. A voice echoes from the far wall. Soft, scratching, not human. A whisper. You turn and see it. The mural, painted across the crumbling plaster, in ink, soot, and something you hope is not beet juice, is a massive rat, crowned, standing atop a mound of broken traps and cheese wheels, with tiny ferret scribes at its feet. And behind it, a spiral, the same spiral on the map from the guild. You mutter, "We found it." Reginald sneezes dramatically in agreement. You search the room, half expecting a council to emerge in miniature robes and demand a cheese tithe. Instead, you find a tunnel, freshly dug, wide enough for a person, reinforced with bits of old shelving. You light a fresh stub of candle and begin to crawl. The tunnel winds downward, the air growing damp, earthier with each step. You see gnawed timbers, tiny footprints, occasional shredded books. At one point, you swear you pass a tiny library. Then the tunnel opens, and you freeze. You're in an underground chamber, vaulted with arched stone walls, flickering lanterns, and rows of seated rats, seated like an audience, watching a central platform where another rat, small, twitchy, confident, is delivering what appears to be a rousing speech in squeaks and tail gestures. You and Reginald stand, dumbfounded. Then all eyes turn to you, hundreds, 1,000 tiny stares. You clear your throat. A lovely venue, a rustle, and then stepping from the shadows. Timothy, larger, cleaner, wearing two ribbons now, one red, one gold. He walks with the gravitas of a mayor inspecting a cheese festival. You take a step back. Reginald growls low and steady. Timothy raises a paw. The room silences. Then, another rat scurries forward. Climbing up a small makeshift lectern, it drops a parchment at your feet. You pick it up. It's handwritten, sloppy, but legible. The age of traps is ending. The vermin remember. You are invited to witness the shift. You whisper, "The shift?" Timothy nods. Then he steps aside, revealing a wall of maps, diagrams, charts, supply lines, food stores, human movement. This is not just a nest, it's a strategy room. You suddenly realize you are not a rat catcher. Not anymore. You're a witness to something changing, and you have no idea what side you're on. You don't move, not for a long moment. Timothy, ever the dramatic little tyrant, holds his gaze like a weathered politician at a cheese-centric summit. His ribbons flutter slightly in the draft of the tunnel. Behind him, a white rat with spectacles squeaks and unrolls a map that looks suspiciously like a repurposed handbill for Dr. Trotter's marvelous liver paste. You feel Reginald shift on your shoulder. He's rigid, tail puffed, muscles tight. You whisper, "Easy now," though it's unclear whether you mean him or yourself. Timothy chirps once. Another rat scurries forward, holding something in its mouth, a tiny scroll tied with a length of thread. It sets the offering at your feet and retreats like it just handed over a subpoena. You pick up the scroll. It reads, "Allies, not enemies. The old ways are done. Join or be left behind." You stare at the words. Join. You, the rat catcher, being offered a job promotion. Possibly as a diplomat. Possibly as a mascot. Hard to say. You mutter, "Historians are going to hate this." The white rat with spectacles starts clicking pebbles together, pointing at diagrams on the wall. Tiny paw prints connect key parts of the city: granaries, bakeries, warehouses, public fountains. Another diagram shows the sewer system with red dots indicating human access points. This isn't random nesting, it's infrastructure. They're not just surviving, they're organizing. Timothy points toward a section of the map marked with a paw print and a large inked X. It's the West Dock Granary. He squeaks twice, then makes a curious gesture. Paw to heart, paw to sky. Reginald makes a faint grumble, like he's had enough symbolism for one day. You exhale. "You want me to help you?" A nod. "To sneak into the granary?" Another nod. You glance around the chamber. Some of the rats are polishing armor made from thimbles. One is sharpening a matchstick into a lance. "Good heavens," you whisper. "It's a tiny army." Historians still argue whether rats in Victorian London ever developed social hierarchies akin to human ones. But here, beneath the city, you're seeing command structure, logistics, even morale. One rat hands another a crumb like a medal. Another is practicing acrobatics using a spool of thread as a balance beam. You could leave. You should leave. You don't. Instead, you nod. Timothy chirps. Once, sharply. The entire chamber bursts into motion. Rats scatter with military precision. Rope ladders unroll. Sacks of breadcrumbs are hoisted over shoulders. One particularly muscular rat slams a button onto a walnut shell, and a trapdoor opens in the wall, revealing a polished tunnel leading north. You don't know what you've agreed to, but the only way out is through. Timothy gestures for you to follow. You do. The tunnel is smoother than the last, lined with old parchment and braced with tooth-carved wood. The air smells faintly of rosemary and ink. You hear the rhythmic march of dozens, no hundreds, of tiny feet. Reginald bristles. You pat him gently. I think we're past the point of no return, mate. At the tunnel's end, a ladder. You climb. Emerge behind a stack of crates in the West Dock granary. It's quiet. Moonlight cuts through broken shutters, catching on dust and grain. You hear the low creak of a ship's in the harbor. Timothy appears beside you, flanked by two bodyguard rats with shoulder pads made from acorn caps. He signals. The operation begins. Rats pour from the shadows. Fast. Coordinated. They scale beams, chew through ropes, disable traps. One group rolls a cheese wheel like it's a prized artifact. Another unplugs sacks of oats with surgical precision. You just stand there stunned. They're not hoarding. They're redistributing. You realize this isn't theft. It's logistics. The rats have been watching the food systems collapse. They've decided to intervene. You whisper. They're feeding the city. Timothy nods solemnly. A crash. You spin. A guard, human, lantern raised. He stares, slack-jawed. What in the... He steps forward, trips, on a rope. Pulled by a rat, he hits the ground like a sack of guilt. Timothy turns to you. This is the moment. The test. You kneel beside the guard, check his pulse. Still breathing. You pull him to the side, tuck him under a grain sack. You didn't see anything? You whisper. Then you turn back. Timothy salutes you with his tail. For one wild second, you salute back. The rats finish and vanish like smoke. Gone. Silent. Only grain dust remains, swirling in the moonlight, like the last chapter of a very strange bedtime story. You step out into the street, head spinning. You're no longer just a rat catcher. You're a reluctant emissary, a bridge between two worlds. And somehow, you don't hate it. You wake up the next morning feeling different. Not in a new man, new life sort of way. More in a you've just committed light treason with rodents sort of way. Reginald is curled at your feet, legs twitching as he dreams of glory, or cheese, or possibly both. You stare at the ceiling, unsure if yesterday actually happened, or if you fell asleep inhaling too much mold and developed an unusually detailed fever dream. Then you sit up. There, tucked into the laces of your left boot, is a breadcrumb. Not just any breadcrumb. A perfect little square, dusted in sugar. A calling card. They were real. The rats, the granary, the maps, the plan. You put your boots on and step outside, blinking in the hazy London sunlight. Nature's version of sepia tone. The street is quieter than usual. Less shouting. Fewer carts. Someone's even managed to sweep part of the curb. Odd. You stroll toward town, half expecting someone to stop you. Point, yell, there he is, the rat whisperer, and pelt you with turnips. Instead, people nod at you, politely. A boy hands you a baked potato without a word. You keep walking, and then, Like a slap from a cold fish, it hits you. The rats, they delivered food. Proper food. Not nibbled bits, not crusts, but whole untouched bundles of grain, sacks of flour, even fruit. Someone told someone, and now you're getting credit for a heist you barely understood and mostly just witnessed. A baker spots you and yells, "Oi, bless you, sir. The good ones came back this morning. Still warm." You blink. The what? She points at her display. Loaves, dozens of them, perfectly shaped. No sign of rodent tooth marks. One even has a smiley face etched in flour on top. You nod awkwardly and keep moving. In the square, a soapbox preacher bellows. He walks with vermin, but feeds the hungry. You duck behind a chimney sweep. Reginald peers out from your coat, smug. Gilles, don't get used to this, you mutter. They'll turn on us the moment someone finds droppings in their soup. But still, it's surreal. You pass a fishmonger who hands you a smoked kipper and calls you Brother Rat. A newsboy offers you a penny paper and a wink. The headline, Mysterious Rodents Rescue. West Dock, is cheese the future? You pocket the paper, stunned. Timothy's working faster than you thought. But the biggest surprise comes as you approach your usual tavern. The innkeeper waves you in with a grin. You're welcome here now. No more charges. You raise an eyebrow. Since when? Since they made you one of them, he says with an awkward curtsy. Also, the pantry's spotless for once. Inside, you sit at your usual table. Moments later, a plate arrives. Real eggs. Hot. Buttered toast. Even tea. You look around suspiciously. Is this poisoned? Just gratitude, the waitress whispers. Thanks to your associates. She taps her nose, walks off. You lean back, mind spinning. You've become something else. Not just the rat man. Something between myth and joke. Urban legend in a waistcoat. You whisper to Reginald, we're one step away from needing business cards. He yawns. Later that afternoon, you make your way to the Guild of Sanitary Overseers, parchment map in hand. You push open the oak door and step inside. Silence, then chaos. You're here. We heard. They've stopped chewing the drapes. The head overseer rushes forward. Tell us everything. You take a deep breath and smile. Well, you say, first there was a rat named Timothy. They blink. You continue. He was wearing 2 ribbons. Gasps. And then they printed a manifesto. Papers are dropped. Someone swoons. And then you stop. Because outside the window, on the stone ledge, sits a rat. 1 ribbon. 1 scroll. Watching. Waiting. You look back at the overseers. I think they'll be in touch. You leave them speechless and step outside. That evening, you return home. Settle into your mattress. Reginald flops on your chest like a tired cat with authority issues. From outside, you hear singing, laughter, no rats, or maybe lots of rats. Well-fed, content, and unseen. You close your eyes and murmur, we might actually survive this. Reginald doesn't answer, but a faint rustle in the wall sounds a lot like applause. You wake the next morning to something truly unusual. Silence. No neighbor arguing with a teapot. No barrel boy hawking bruised pears with existential despair. No scuttling, scratching, squeaking. Just peace, which, in Victorian London, is deeply suspicious. You sit up slowly. Reginald, for once, is still asleep, splayed on his back like a possum after a particularly intense cheese binge. You tiptoe past him, pull on your boots, and peek out the door. The street is spotless, not just swept, gleaming. The gutters glisten, the stones have visible shapes. Someone's even scrubbed off the mysterious brown stain on the lamppost that no one's talked about since 1843. You step outside cautiously. Mrs. Dobbins, the soap maker, is planting flowers in a window box. She smiles. smiles. At you. Morning, love, she chirps. Lovely weather for diplomacy, isn't it? You blink. I what? Before she can answer, a boy from the Guild of Overseers sprints up, breathless, waving a scroll. He pants. Urgent message from the, negotiation nest. Of course. You open the scroll. Inside, Rat Human Summit, 6 p.m., Old Theater. Bring the ferret. Reginald grunts in his sleep. You mutter, You're invited too, Your Majesty. The rest of the day unfolds like a dream with suspiciously good lighting. People greet you in the street. One man tips his hat and hands you a fresh apple. A chimney sweep gifts you a half-used bar of soap for the big night. Even the local cat nods respectfully from a windowsill. At 5:45 p.m., you and Reginald head toward the old theater. It hasn't hosted a show since that unfortunate pantomime incident involving a goose and 3 pounds of mustard. The roof's caved in, but the walls still stand, bearing faded posters of forgotten actors and bold claims about the dramatic event of the century. Tonight might actually deliver on that promise. You step inside. The interior has been transformed. Lanterns glow softly. Seats are filled, half with humans, half with rats. Some wear capes. One has a monocle. There's even a ferret sized cushion with Reginald's name embroidered in very uneven stitching. You sit, trying not to gape. A small stage has been erected from matchboxes and wooden spoons. Upon it, Timothy stands. 3 ribbons now, red, gold, and something that might have once been green. He raises a paw. Silence falls. A rat interpreter squeaks dramatically beside him, translating each chirp. Greetings to our honored guests. Tonight marks a turning point. You glance around. The guild overseers are here, seated stiffly in the front row, clutching their ledgers, like nervous uncles at a wedding. The fishmonger, the baker, even the lamplighter, all invited. Timothy continues, We propose peace, collaboration, mutual benefit. Squeaks and gasps ripple through both species. Reginald sighs loudly. You suspect he's unimpressed with the theatrics. Timothy gestures toward a small cart pushed onto stage, filled with food, perfectly preserved. No bite marks. For every crumb we take, we offer one in return. We will clean the streets, warn of plague, carry messages. In exchange, safety. A truce. The guild overseer stands, clearly sweating. And if we refuse? Timothy tilts his head. The lights dim slightly. From the rafters above, hundreds of glowing eyes appear, just watching. The overseer clears his throat. Not that we would. Timothy nods. The lights return. The baker stands, wiping flour on her apron. I say yes. The lamplighter raises a hand. Me too. They've kept my ladder rat-free for a week. Even the cat in the window lets out an approving meow from the balcony. It's settled. A rat-human accord, signed by paw print and pen, ratified over tea and stale biscuits. As the crowd disperses, a small rat approaches you with a velvet box. Inside, a brass badge. Rat liaison, first class. Reginald gets a ribbon. You pin yours to your coat. It glints faintly in the candlelight. Outside, night has fallen, but it feels warmer, softer. As if the city, just for a moment, is holding its breath. You and Reginald walk home in silence. At your door, you find a gift, a wedge of cheese and a note. For services rendered, expect more. You stare at the stars, unusually bright above the chimneys. Somewhere beneath your feet, London hums, still full of secrets, but maybe, just maybe, a little less divided. You sleep like someone who's either at peace or completely overwhelmed. Reginald, ever the stoic, curls up beside you with one paw draped dramatically over his eyes as if to say, no autographs before breakfast. Morning arrives in the form of a gentle tap on the window. Not a knock, a tap. You sit up and see it. A rat in a bowler hat, holding a miniature clipboard. You blink. Once, twice. He taps again, businesslike. You open the window. He scurries in, nods curtly, and drops a scroll at your feet. Reginald gives him a squint that could curdle milk. The rat doesn't flinch. Clearly upper management. You unroll the scroll. In day one of implementation. Inspection to follow. Yours in cooperation. Rat Central Command. You murmur, oh no. There's an implementation. Reginald sighs so hard he falls off the bed. Outside, London is already shifting. The city feels cleaner. And not in the terrifying way that suggests rich people are moving in. Just functional. Like someone finally remembered, the streets are meant to be walked on, not waded through. You head out into the morning fog, now laced with the faint scent of roasted chestnuts and responsibility. First stop, Baker's Row. Mrs. Fenwick greets you with a tray of fresh rolls. Not a single nibble, she says proudly. And they left me a thank you note. In flour. Next, the stables. The stable boy waves a broom. They swept the hay. I don't even know how. Down by the docks, you see what may be the strangest sight of all. A group of rats, in tidy little rows, are helping unload sacks of grain. A man in a flat cap gives them orders like it's the most normal thing in the world. And no one seems alarmed, not anymore. Historians still argue whether early Victorian cities could have ever functioned with rodent assistance. You now have opinions on the matter. Strong ones. Possibly book-worthy. Back in your neighborhood, you find the lamplighter humming a tune as he polishes the base of a street lamp. Haven't seen a rat all morning, he says, except for the one that handed me this. He shows you a tiny oilcloth wrapped note. It reads, Happy Lighting Day. You nod politely. You're not sure what's happening anymore, but it seems nice. You return home and sit on your stoop, sipping tea brewed from a fresh packet. No mystery leaves involved. A child approaches. Mister? You glance down. Are you really friends with the rats? You consider. Well, you say, we've had our disagreements, but we're on speaking terms. He beams. Can I be a rat friend too? You smile. First rule, always share your crumbs. The boy runs off to tell someone, probably everyone. You lean back and watch the street hum along, carriages clattering, boots tapping, pigeons cursing, as always. But underneath, something has changed. You can feel it. A kind of rhythm, a quiet cooperation. Rats no longer just scurrying through shadows. Now they're part of it, part of everything. And you're no longer a rat catcher. You're a liaison, an accidental ambassador, a man with a ferret and a badge, and a reputation that somehow includes the phrase rodent whisperer. You sip your tea, look at Reginald, and nod. I think we've done all right. He blinks, clearly unconvinced. But then, from the alley, a familiar squeak. Timothy, wearing yet another ribbon. He tosses you a coin, one of yours, shiny and clean, and nods. Then vanishes. And just like that, the story continues. Unseen, unfolding. A partnership sealed not by treaty or war, but by toast crumbs and mutual inconvenience. And now, let it all slow down. You're back in your room. The city hums beyond the cracked window panes, but in here all is still. Reginald has curled up again, rising and falling with each quiet breath, like a slightly judgmental loaf of bread. Your coat hangs on its peg. Your boots rest by the hearth, still dusted, in the day's oddness, but drying out. The candle flickers softly, its light casting gentle, buttery shadows across the floor. In the distance, a cart creaks, a clock chimes, Somewhere deep beneath the city, you swear you hear a faint squeak, followed by applause. You lie down, let your weight settle. No more rats to chase, no more scrolls to read, just you, your ferret, and a city that, for tonight at least, feels just a little bit lighter. Your thoughts drift like fog. You remember the bakery, the old printing press, that tiny monocled rat in the audience. It all begins to feel fuzzy at the edges, like a story told too many times in the quiet corner of a pub. And that's all right, because you don't need to catch every detail. Some things, some stories, are meant to be slipped into like warm sheets or a well worn coat. Let the corners blur. Let your mind wander. You did your part. You saw it through. So now you can let go. Breathe in, deep and slow, then let it fall away. You're safe. You're full. You're home. The night is yours now. Sweet dreams, Ratcatcher. Sleep well.